welcome. You're watching the biggest exclusive tonight with me, Akanksha, Swarup. Now, Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is on a 4-day visit to India. And so, today, India and Bangladesh signed 7 MOUs during the crucial bilateral meet between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh. The MOUs range from river sharing to railways, space technology to even Prasar Bharati and Bangladesh television. But what remains missing is a concrete action plan on how to tackle the issue of illegal Rohingya refugees. At a time when the centre has strictly instructed the state governments to deport illegal migrants like the Rohingyas, has the India-Bangladesh bilateral failed to arrive upon a solid plan of action to address the grave security challenges posed by illegal migrants, especially the Rohingyas?
Neighbours, strong allies, and huge overlaps that seek intensive cooperation. India-Bangladesh relations have seen the best phase since Sheikh Hasina's premiership from 2009. Her strong stand against Islamist terror and her government's denial of safe havens to anti-India groups have built a strong basis for cooperation. And that's beyond the historical linkage.
India is our friend. Whenever I come to India, it's a big pleasure for us, for me especially, because we always recall the contribution India has done during our liberation war.
Security to trade and commerce, to power and energy, to defence, river water sharing and more were on the table at key bilateral talks between the Prime Ministers. After delegation-level talks at the Hyderabad House in New Delhi, 7 memoranda of understanding were signed. Pacts on Kushiara River water sharing, railways connectivity and personnel training, capacity building in judicial services and other areas, with security being a big fulcrum.
आज हमने आतंकवाद और कट्टरवाद के खिलाफ सहयोग पर भी जोर दिया। 1971 की स्पिरिट को जीवंत रखने के लिए भी यह बहुत आवश्यक है कि हम ऐसी शक्तियों का मिलकर मुकाबला करें।
For India, illegal Rohingya migrants pose a huge security threat. A detailed CNN News 18 investigation in August showed an influx from Bangladesh via Nepal and into Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Stretches in Assam bordering Bangladesh are also a big security concern. Worries of recruitment by terror groups, disturbing the demographic balance, and smuggling rackets pose a big threat. India has extended all help to Bangladesh on the issue.
It is absolutely important for the safety and security of societies on both sides that the criminality, the criminal activities across the border is limited, that the elements and the people who are associated with such criminal activities are apprehended and dealt as per the provisions of the law.
On Bangladesh's part, 1.1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar have made the country home, the highest in the world. Bangladesh has looked to India for help to have them rehabilitated back to Rakhine in Myanmar.
On humanitarian ground, we give them shelter, but how long they will stay here? So, in the camp they are staying, our environment hazard is there. Then some people engaged in drug trafficking or some arms conflict, women trafficking. Day by day it is increasing.
Also of concern for India is China's big Bangladesh outreach. Supply of arms and vaccines from China has raised warnings of Xi's debt diplomacy at work here too. The Modi-Hasina bilateral meet, the 16th since 2015, goes a long way in ironing out outstanding issues.
So remember, there are over 1 million Rohingya refugees stationed currently in Bangladesh. If we look at India, there are close to 40,000 of them in India itself who have crossed over the border from Bangladesh. So what is the illegal Rohingya crisis in India like? How has it impacted the country? Let's break it down for you. Point number one is the huge security concern that they are posing, particularly if you were to look at the national capital, Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir as well, and even the northeast. Remember, CNN News 18 has already done exposés which talk about this crisis even taking place in the Simanchal area. Then we have worries of recruitment by terror groups. Remember, most of them are hired by terror modules being run by various illegal madrasas as well. Number three is the cause of social stress, disturbing demographic balance, because remember, there are consensus on record which talk about this kind of major shift which we have seen in the rise of population as far as these illegal migrants are concerned. And last but not the least is the spurt in human trafficking, the high value smuggling rackets. And these smuggling rackets also talk about drug trafficking as well, something that has already been highlighted by Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. And so that is the question that we are posing right now. Sheikh Hasina in Delhi, the Rohingya crisis resolution, is it key to the Bangladesh and India ties? Let's discuss this question as I pose it to my guests. I'm joined in by Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, who is the former secretary of the MEA. I'm also joined in by Dr. Shripati Narayanan, who is a research fellow at the Indian Council for World Affairs. I'm also joined in by Mr. P.K. Mishra, who is the former ADG of the BSF. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining this discussion today. Mr. Ranjan Chakravarti, if I could come to you first. India's Foreign Secretary today, Mr. Quatra, acknowledged that border security did feature during these talks and that both leaders, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, highlighted the need to deal with criminal activities on both sides of the borders. Do you think that today's bilateral could have done more and that mere acknowledgement of that talk was just not enough?
I think the acknowledgement is a good beginning because there are criminal mafias on both sides involved in huge amount of smuggling, human trafficking, narcotic trafficking, all kinds of smuggling. Even ordinary things they smuggle and market it on the other side.
Right, Mr. Ranjan, I'm sorry to interject. I'm sorry to interject, but you know that acknowledgement has already happened years ago. The fact that there were MOUs signed, but this just featured in the press conference being addressed by India's Foreign Secretary.
Well, yes, it has been acknowledged, and that is why we created a border management department in the Ministry of Home Affairs many years ago, because border management became the term for how to deal with these issues. And so I am just sort of reiterating the fact that border management becomes a very major issue because of the criminal mafia that operates along the border. Perhaps your viewers might like to know that the illegal smuggling of goods, its value is more than the legal trade sometimes, or at least equal, if not more. So I think this is something that has been going on for years. And human trafficking is there, illegal migration is there. The same channels operate along for different things, goods, human trafficking, narcotics, fake Indian currency, which comes in from various places. And we all know who's at the root of the fake Indian currency. It's Pakistan, basically, which sends it via Nepal into Bangladesh or through couriers into Bangladesh so that it can enter India and be used by their whatever contacts and their constituencies or the fundamentalists and the puritanical elements that operate in along illegal madrasas, for example. So these people operate, and in Bangladesh too, there are groups which are extremists, and much of it has been curbed by Prime Minister Hasina to her credit. And but then some of them spill over into India, and we have caught them in India, and which is a good sign that there is some intelligence cooperation is succeeding in terms of curbing their activity.
Right, and speaking
I think border management is very, very important.
Right.
But then we have a lot of protocols in place for border management. But don't forget, it's a huge border, 4,096.
Absolutely.
And it's a porous border in the sense that there are many areas, many, pieces of the border which are riverine. That is the river is the border.
Right,
And
Mr.
that is
Mishra,
used for smuggling,
if I could
for
come to
cattle
you,
smuggling,
right.
particularly from India.
Right. Very interestingly pointed out by you, Mr. Chakravarti, in terms of the complexity of the Indo-Bangladesh border. On that note, I'm going to bring in Mr. P.K. Mishra, who happens to be the former ADG of the BSF. Mr. Mishra, you heard what Mr. Chakravarti has to say. We've heard the BSF also talk about the complexity of the Indo-Bangladesh border and how sensitive it is. But what makes it so complex, and what are the security challenges if we were to look at perhaps the state of Assam, even the areas of Simanchal or even Jammu and Kashmir?
Yes, you have asked a beautiful question, Akanksha. I can well tell you, I just heard Mr. Pinat Chakravarti is a good friend of mine, and I have served in Bengal, West Bengal and Bangladesh border, and Assam-Bangladesh border, and I know it pretty well. And I operated in Dhubri also, particularly in river Brahmaputra. I will tell you, as Mr. Pinat Chakravarti was telling, 4,996 kilometer border. It's very, very difficult because there are 54 rivers. 54 rivers flowing from India to Bangladesh.
Right.
It's not only Brahmaputra or Tista. Of course, Tista problem is still pending from 2011. But I will tell you about only one river, Dhubri. It has so many Char Islands, and there are permanent Char Islands. There are temporary Char Islands. In summer and winter, a lot of new Char Islands they come up, and the Rohingyas and also from Mymensingh people they come and occupy it. And here Dhubri is very close, and we have the AIUDF. They accept these people immediately to Gwalpara and Dhubri and give them ration card and identity card and whatnot. This is continuing with Dhubri and Gwalpara. And then I can tell you, the Rohingyas are not only coming from Indo-Bangladesh border. Now this 1.1 million Rohingyas who are there in Bangladesh in various places, they are coming through agents, paying through agents from Nepal border to Simanchal, Bihar and UP border. This is very dangerous and demographic.
In fact, that's an expose that was covered by CNN News 18. We were the ones to bring it.
Very correct. And but I can well tell you that these are the only two countries where the border guarding forces, the BGB and the BSF, they work together and they patrol together. I'm very sure during Sheikh Hasina's period, our relation with Bangladesh border guards are very fine, and we get a lot of intelligence cover from them. If something happens in Bangladesh and their Jamaatul Mujahid of Bangladesh or Al Jamaat, they come towards West Bengal side, we get the information and we work on this. And similarly, if somebody from Calcutta or from West Bengal border, particularly from Murshidabad, North 24 Parganas, Malda and Nadia district, they go to Bangladesh side, we also inform them. And there's a nice coordination and cooperation between the intelligence agencies of both BSF and BJP. And we hope, definitely, excluding Rohingya issue is very dangerous, very difficult to handle, because the only thing what Sheikh Hasina has told,
Mr. Mishra,
they have to be repatriated.
Right, Mr. Mishra, I'm going to deep dive. I'm going to deep dive into this entire challenge as far as the terror angle is concerned, even the demographic shift. But let me also go quickly across to my third guest, Dr. Shripati Narayanan, who's been very patiently awaiting his turn. Shripati, if I could come to you, Dhaka has asked New Delhi to use its influence with Myanmar's leadership to help send the Rohingyas back to the Rakhine. How much can New Delhi actually manage going by the current tensions between the Myanmar military and the Arakan army?
Well, if I can be undiplomatic and blunt, nothing is going to come of it. Because if you look at the history of the Rohingya issue, and especially the illegal refugee crisis, since the 90s, till 2017, when you had about 700,000 Rohingyas from the Rakhine province, formerly known as the Arakan province of Myanmar, spilling over to Bangladesh. This was the third incident. And the outflow of Rohingyas was not in drips and drops, but swarms. One. Two, this time what the Tatmadaw, which is the Burmese army, has done is that they have gone by the old adage, no man, no problem.
Yeah.
They don't have a single Rohingya in the Rakhine province. They don't have a single Rohingya in Myanmar worth mentioning. Therefore, it is the problem of the rest of the world, whether it be Bangladesh, whether it be India, whether it be the international community, whether it be in the case of human smuggling and all associated organized crimes in Southeast Asia, whether it be Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and thank God, not Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So that is the problem with the whole world.
Shripati, how do you view...
Is,
Right. I'm sorry to interject.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry to interject because the burgeoning question that still remains unanswered is that just ahead of her bilateral meet, Sheikh Hasina said that India can do a lot as far as the Rohingya crisis is concerned and in terms of repatriating them back to the Rakhine. What made her exactly say that, and how do you think the bilateral went? Because as I pointed out earlier, a host of MOUs were signed, but nothing referred to the Rohingya crisis per se.
Well, for Bangladesh, I will not as much pin it on Sheikh Hasina, the Honorable Prime Minister, but Bangladesh as a state, this is a very sensitive issue for a simple issue of statistics. The country's population is what, 16, 17 million, and you've got 1.1 Rohingyas whose ethnicity, whose identity, whose education, whose outlook is quite different. Second is that Bangladesh, for I would say kind of for 75 years, going from 1947, has had a very unstable and uncomfortable domestic political issue, whether it be in terms of political violence or organized violence in terms of militancy and terrorism. So for them, and let us not forget that the Rohingyas are not as innocent as we think. In the 80s, you had the Rohingya Solidarity Organization, of which few of the boys had gone to Afghanistan. They have got a toehold in Karachi. They've got a toehold in Saudi Arabia. And before the 2017 Rohingya crisis, you had Rohingyas in Jammu, you had Rohingyas in Delhi, you had those people in Hyderabad and
they're
Rajasthan.
very much in Delhi, in fact, in detention centers, which also led to the entire controversy of those EWS flats.
That is today. And they were also found in a small colony all the way down south in Chennai.
Yes,
so their movement is not just across the border, but they kind of move across the world.
All right.
So in that sense, and their network and govern the background they come and the ability to be radicalized easily, the security issue is not as simple. For Bangladesh, there is a far more serious issue, which, if I may be permitted more than a minute to explain, is that in a country like Bangladesh or in most countries, the political spectrum is split between left and right. How far of left and how far of right is immaterial. And in the case of Bangladesh, that political split overspills into its foreign policy. Are you seen as pro-India? Are you seen as anti-India? So for the state, there is always the subconscious issue whether these guys would be made sacrificial lambs for someone else's agenda.
Right. I'm actually running short of time. If I could come to Mr. Pinak Chakravarti. Mr. Chakravarti, years ago, the UN had passed a resolution on the Rohingyas tabled by the OIC and the European Union. But has the UN done enough? And why should the onus of following international law obligations be placed on India and Bangladesh alone, especially in the case of India, I ask, because India didn't even sign the UN Refugee Convention of 1951.
Look, India is sympathetic to the problem that Bangladesh is facing, but I agree that it is not India's problem. And it is the international community's problem, which has failed to pressurize Myanmar to take back these refugees. When Bangladesh went to the United Nations Security Council, it was China which blocked all action, because China has a vested interest in Myanmar, and they want to come use Myanmar for their entry into the Bay of Bengal. So I think there is a complicated issue, geopolitical goals being pursued by China, which makes Myanmar confident that they will not come under international pressure. For example, if the UN Security Council passes a unanimous resolution, barring, putting sanctions on Myanmar, etc., then they will come under pressure. But nobody is willing to do that because, and India cannot alone do it. India can persuade them, talk to them, humanitarian assistance can be given, which we have. But I don't think India can actually pressurize Myanmar to change its policy and take back these million-odd, Rohingya refugees. That's not going to happen, in my view. I don't think that's going to happen, and there is no way Myanmar junta, military junta, can be pressurized unless the whole world comes together, and that's not likely to happen.
All right. Having said that, let's also talk about the solutions that have been offered so far, because the fact of the matter is that there's no focus on long-term sort of solutions. If I could come to Shripati on that note, Shripati, the fact that so far the humanitarian response to the Rohingyas in Bangladesh has been about an emergency response rather than a long-term resettlement strategy. How can that be ensured by India or Bangladesh? If one were to go by what Mr. Chakravarti has to say, India cannot pressurize Myanmar beyond a certain point. Then how is one to go about this?
Well, for that there is one primary prerequisite, and that is, do you have a theoretical solution or a solution at hand? Which is, in simple words, these guys go back to Rakhine. But the question is, will the Tatmadaw allow them? No. So when the position of the Tatmadaw is quite clear and evident, we are between the rock and a hard place. One. Two is that for Bangladesh, let's give the devil its due. That country simply doesn't have land, even for its own people. It has got one of the highest per capita density. In the past, we had issues of Bangladeshi illegal migrants. Today, that has, because of its economic progress, that movement has reduced. But today it has become Rohingya. Third issue is that, and which is the issue with Myanmar. Myanmar happens to be one of the few unique states where its purpose of existence is the guys who are sitting at the high table. It is not the welfare of the people. It is not the nation state. And not even they don't even make pretense of it. Unlike few other so-called militant groups who try, or at least for photo op, claim that they are trying to behave like a civil administration. The Tatmadaw has never done that. So the question is what the Tatmadaw is going to do. Second issue is that if you really look in the larger scheme of things, except in the case of the Syrian refugee about a decade ago, where they flooded into Europe and Europe, where to some degree the Europeans opened the doors. Seldom do we have an issue where a refugee population has been translocated en masse or in sizable numbers at the other end of the continent, other end of the planet. So the question is, who's going to take them? And this issue has to be internationalized.
Right.
But the question is that how do you engage with Myanmar? Aung San Suu Kyi couldn't do it. She couldn't kind of talk sense to the generals. And for the past 1.5 years, what exactly happening in Myanmar is quite hazy. The less said, the better for in keeping decency in mind. And the last point is that, so when you're going to look at the larger picture, as I said in the beginning, if you don't have a solution, there's no way you can work. Because you know that the solution is not acceptable.
Mr. P.K. Mishra,
I'm sorry if I'm sounding quite pessimistic. The only other solution is that all the countries in the neighborhood can, like they did with the Syrian refugees in Europe, have their own quota and take them in small batches.
The pessimism seems quite realistic considering we are seeing what's happening in our own country. So, I mean, if one were to begin from their own internal shores, we know what the situation is like within our own country. The government at the center is also trying very hard. They've issued instructions to the states to deport them, but nothing seems to be working out. Mr. P.K. Mishra, if I could come to you as far as the terror recruitment by groups is concerned, what is the kind of role of hardline outfits like the SDPI when it comes to giving support to these illegal migrants, especially the Rohingyas?
Yes, they are getting a lot of help. I can well tell you, location of Rohingyas you are telling now 40,000. 40,000 is the official version. What
Right.
about the Rohingyas who have come to Simanchal, those 11 districts and 7 districts of Bihar and UP? Their numbers have gone more. It's about 60,000 or so. And the contact they have with AQIS, particularly with ISI and AQIS and also Taliban. You can't just sit idle, because they are very, very easily they can be trapped as informers. They will collect, they will side with AQIS, and it's very easy because they are poor people. Anytime they can be taken and they will be recruited by ISI and AQIS and ISI. Very clear. And I will tell you, here is a country where in the capital of the country and in 3 capitals of the states, the Rohingyas are placed. Why not to send them to a particular island in river Brahmaputra and to guard them, rather than keeping it in Delhi, and remove them from all those areas, particularly the no man's land in Bihar and UP border. In no man's land they have occupied. They have to be thrown out. Otherwise, we are heading for trouble, because they are involved with FICN, as Mr. Chatterjee was telling, involved with foreign FICN, involved with jihadis, involved with drugs. Anything can happen, and before it goes out of control.
No, but Mr. Mishra, you know the threat or the bigger challenge comes from political outfits within the country themselves, because the security forces can try and throw them out, but if they are being issued identification cards like the Aadhaar cards by various political parties who are targeting them as vote banks,
Akanksha,
how do you address such a problem?
Akanksha, it is now happening in Bihar and UP. Political parties are giving them Aadhaar cards and voters cards. Now they have started giving them, as when News 18 started giving all these problems, they brought out these problems. Now Aadhaar cards and identity cards are being given to these Rohingyas and those who came from Nepal.
Right, and let me tell you, they are blending in with the locals, because that's how they are able to become part of the property owned within the country. They are marrying daughters and women from the country, and they are blending in.
They are, and like Bangladesh migrants they did, and of course they tell about 4 crores, but I can well tell that 6 crores Bangladeshi migrants are there and in India. Similarly, as they blended in West Bengal, why West Bengal? From starting from West Bengal up to Kashmir, I have seen a lot of pockets in Kashmir also Bangladesh migrants are there, particularly in Parimpura. I have seen it myself. So these people are blending and they will create problems like Bangladesh migrants. They are a threat to India always. They will be a threat to India always in future, until and unless, of course, United Nations Security Council will not give any answer, and the military junta in Myanmar, they will not accept them. But at least to save our own country from our future problem, we have to keep them together. We have to see that they don't blend with other people.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mishra, I'm running short of time. I'd like to have closing thoughts from Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti. Mr. Chakravarti, how do you think that the government at the center can ensure that that this is averted, that this entire crisis, as far as terrorism, it's a looming crisis, is averted by various security agencies? And how can we avert political parties from issuing various identifications like the Aadhaar card, or even avert them from falling prey to something like human trafficking?
I'm afraid the political parties have been doing this for a very long time. How do you think all the illegal Bangladeshis have settled in Assam, in West Bengal? Once they came in, they were given all these things, and they were created as vote banks for the political parties. And it's still going on, I think. So I think the same thing is being repeated with the Rohingyas, because there are these NGOs, then there are these Islamic organizations which have sympathy for these people because they are Muslims.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chakravarti. I'll have to leave it at that because I'm running short of time. Many thanks to you, Mr. Chakravarti, and many thanks to Dr. Shripati Narayanan, and also many thanks to Mr. P.K. Mishra. And with that, it's a wrap of Biggest Exclusive tonight. And with that, I quickly toss over to my colleague Shivani, who will be joining you on Plain Speak.